Afternoon all. How are you all today? Is somebody out there? Yeah, thank you, good. So I'm Simon Davis. I'm MD and founder of Ox Delivers. We're supposed to be talking about innovation in e-mobility today. I'll tell you a bit about our business, because obviously that's my job and that's what I do all day, is talk about things. But also I thought I'd start by just showing a little bit of a video which shows what some of the stuff we're up to. Stop it there, because that's the bit where it gets into Dana, who paid for the video, which is why we get to show it. But Dana aren't here today, and I'm not being paid to promote Dana. So that's a bit of Ox. I'll come back to it more in a minute. But I thought first I'd talk about some other interesting innovations, and I get your opinion on innovation. So there's lots of things. You Google what is innovation, there's about 3 zillion different ways of measuring it and looking at it. So I thought I'd pick 4 interesting products. So let's start with the Tesla Model S. Everybody's heard of the Tesla Model S. So on a scale of very innovative, slightly innovative, and not at all innovative, where would you say the Tesla Model S sat? Any hands up for people who think it's highly innovative? There's a few. Slightly innovative? Not at all innovative. So we've got most people in the middle. I'm guessing that's because everyone's taking the middle ground, right, and just being safe. Like, you can't be too far wrong. You're only one position out. So I think I'd agree with this gentleman over here that the Model S isn't at all innovative as a product. You know, when Jaguar finally got around to launching a diesel S-Type, nobody got excited. It's just another way of pushing a car along, right? There are, however, lots of things that are really innovative about Tesla. The success of Tesla is largely built on its ability to be a better car maker than the existing competitors. I was a massive doubter of Tesla for years and years and years, and I was completely wrong, it turns out. But you just have to look at things like their innovation in terms of marketing. They spend nothing on marketing. Their sales expense is less than 1%. Mercedes spends 7%. Basically, what that means is Tesla spend more money on R&D than Mercedes do, and therefore they come up with clever ideas. And they do things like mega pressings, mega castings. You know, 15 years ago, Jaguar did a mixture of castings and extrusions on the XK, and concluded it wasn't a very good idea. Tesla are now rolling out mega castings for the back and the front of a Model 3 and a Model Y, and it saves tons of time and effort putting these things together. So all of the things that are innovative about a Tesla are very little to do with the fact it's an electric car. To be honest, they'd probably have made a success in another era with another sort of powertrain. They'd have still built a successful business 20 years ago. It just so happened that it coincided with the rise of EV. Now let's talk about McDonald's. Who likes McDonald's? Everyone loves a McDonald's, surely. And bearing in mind that Clayton Christensen, you know, uses McDonald's as an example of disruptive innovation, have we got any votes for a McDonald's burger being highly innovative? 1 vote, excellent. There's one guy who's right over here, by the way. But of course, there's nothing innovative about a burger. What's innovative about McDonald's is the fact that they only sold burgers. First McDonald's menu had like 7 things on the menu. So you walked in, you got a fresh burger, you walked out again. And it was cheap, because the only thing they bought was burgers, buns, and a bit of lettuce. You know, and not much lettuce at that, is it? It's hardly the healthiest thing going. So again, another example of an innovative product that isn't really an innovative product at all. What was innovative about it was the process. Gogoro, although I'm probably not saying that very well, is a battery swapping station. They're doing a gazillion battery swaps a month. And that is arguably both an innovative product and an innovative process. You know, they're doing something new with batteries. Mind you, batteries, we've done swappable batteries before, haven't we? It's called AA batteries, you know. Like, it's just a big AA battery, dude, isn't it? It's nothing exciting. And actually, I have to admit, I first used Uber for the first time last week. It was brilliant. Like, I've avoided Uber because obviously Uber is evil, yeah? Synonymous with the Dark Lord, etc., etc. But I used it for the first time last week because I'm really bad at logistics, which is ironic, running a logistics company. But I can never get people in the right place. My wife had gone out and taken the car, and I'd committed to giving my sister a lift to town. Like, this doesn't work. I don't have a car to move her in. So I had to use Uber, but it was brilliant. But is there anything innovative about a taxi ride? Not really. It's a taxi, yeah? But the app is innovative. You know, it's just so easy. So I guess my thought about innovation with stuff is that there isn't a good or a bad type of innovation. There are innovations that work, and really they're the innovations that the customers don't really notice. It's just neat, it just works, it just happens. And some of those innovations are found really deep down in organisations, like how do we do omega casting so we don't have to stick 200 bits of metal together to make the back end of a Tesla? Some of those innovations are right at the front end, like how do we build an app that makes the process of getting a taxi, which is obviously one of the world's worst jobs. You know, I'm sat outside a pub, it's raining, my wife wants to get home, it's 2 a.m, I just want a taxi. Like, dealing with that in a way that's just press a button, look, here it is come and pick you up, are really important. And some of the least exciting products are highly innovative delivery mechanisms, and some exciting products are innovative in their own right, but probably not a lot of them. Does that mean all innovation is good? No. Some innovation is really bad, right? You know, this is, so we're told, a really innovative vehicle. It's the opposite of the Model S, if you think. Model S, ultra dull styling, ultra conventional. The most, I drove one about 10 years ago, one of the early ones, and the most notable thing about it was they'd forgotten to put a centre console in. They'd clearly run out of money, and there was an armrest, and there was a big screen in front of you. There was nothing in between. It was like, did you just forget? Or perhaps it was just one of their build quality issues. But this is a Tesla, whatever it's called, Cybertruck. It's got an exoskeleton. You might have noticed in the environment, if you go out and look at creatures, the only things with exoskeletons are quite small. Basically, if you have a small wobbly bit, you can put a crusty bit around the outside. If you've got a big wobbly thing, putting a crusty bit around the outside doesn't work because it all wobbles around. You need a skeleton inside. And I just can't imagine being the poor engineer responsible for pedestrian safety, having to explain to Elon why having edges that look like that made of really hard stuff. It would be the world's worst job right now. So we'll see what happens when it finally arrives. So there's some good innovations, and now I'll talk a little bit about why Ox is a good innovation. So there's a really, really big problem called moving stuff. In the UK, we've got loads of cars. There's roughly one car for every 2 people. There's more cars than you can shake a stick at. They actually move hardly at all. But the car industry is properly weird. So if you imagine you're the CEO of an organisation, and I'm a market consultant, and I walk in and I say to you, did you know that you work in a market and you currently serve half the market? Half of the customers in this market using your exact same product don't buy from you. What would you do? You'd say, well, I'll build a product to serve those customers. Well, that's exactly the case of the car industry in the UK. Half of the car industry is used cars. In the UK, a highly affluent country, half the people don't buy off the car industry, they buy a second-hand car. That is even more extreme when you go globally, because you look at the global distribution of wealth, and the tiny bit on the right side is the bit the car industry sells to. And it's getting worse because car makers continually, to drive their revenue, cover their costs, keep pushing more and more aspirational product, which basically means product that depreciates faster. Because as soon as you drive it out the workshop, out the dealer, well, it's not cool anymore. Okay, So I'm going to drive you back into it by making an even cooler product, but it ends up in a cycle. So this is a map that the car industry won't ever show you, which is a map of where the cars aren't sold. So, and the scale is borderline ridiculous. So the darkest colour is less than 0.1 car sale per 1,000 people. So it's 1 car sale per 10,000 people. Now, 1 car, average seating capacity of 5, that leaves 9,995 people without a seat. And by my reckoning, this covers about 3 billion people who live in countries where you have less than 50 cars per 1,000 people and less GDP per capita of less than $10,000. So low incomes, folks. So the IC, the internal combustion car industry, hasn't solved this problem at all. In fact, they keep retreating into the top right-hand corner. So I guess my question is, how does EV innovation access these people? Because right now, Tesla isn't doing that, right? All the EVs you can buy are the expensive, ugly ones, like, say, I won't say like what, because and the impact of that, the impact of this colossal failure of the car industry to serve people is that in Africa, 70% of stuff, by both distance and weight, is moved on the heads of people and children. Like, that's an insane statistic. Like, everywhere you go in Africa, you will see people carrying stuff on their heads. Next to the people carrying it on their heads, you'll see people pushing it along on a bicycle. And then you'll see a few trucks, which will probably kill you just by standing behind them because the soot is so awful. So what we are trying to do is solve that problem, not the problem of car makers and selling to people who already have cars. We're trying to provide affordable, reliable, zero emissions transport. And we do that by providing on-demand transport. Because the brilliant thing about on-demand models is it aligns the customer demand, which is cheap, reliable, with the business demands, because EVs are cheaper to operate than ICE vehicles. They use a cheaper fuel, they have less bits to break, they can last longer, they're more efficient. So what is not to like? Why would I not run an EV in a on-demand mobility type scenario? And we have a truck, so I have to show you a picture of the truck because everybody always asks me about the truck, but we have a truck, but it's the least exciting bit of our business, by my argument. It's a truck, yeah? It's got 4 wheels and you can put 2 tons in the back and it's electric. But it's designed to operate on a mobility as a service basis. So it's about how long can you make it last, not how many more can you sell. And so our innovation is much more than the innovation that you see. We've got the stuff at the front of the house that customers see and that in terms of being able to access transport for the first time potentially. And we've got the stuff that all the engineers focus on, which is the truck at the back end. But the real innovation is how you connect that up. The real innovation is how you know that you've got a spare part for the truck in a depot in the middle of nowhere. The real innovation is knowing what the battery management system does when it goes up a particular hill that drives overheating and therefore kills the battery, and how you can change that so the battery lasts longer in real life. So there you go. That's innovation in the mobility system. I'm going to hand over to, I forgot, Ian. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
right.
anyway.
Where would you like this?
Anyway. Okay. I'll go there.
You want there? Okay, that's fine.
Thanks. Very interesting conversations and very, very diverse conversations and technologies. So Simon, let me ask you a question. You talked about innovation and you talked about Uber, and your model is about, so it's like the ASP model where your user pay. What's the sustainability and scalability in a country like Africa, for a business like yours, and where do you see it going over the next 10 years?
I think the opportunity is vast because, which obviously I would, because I'm a startup, and obviously world domination is, at the bottom of the list of the things you're going to do in the next 5 years. But this is where I think innovation is really important, because bringing new models in, Isobel just talked about battery sizes. massive batteries. There's a function. I used to work in strategy in JLR, and so I wrote a paper on how you position EVs like 10 plus years ago. And your only solution basically is to take your highest margin vehicle and make that an EV, because anything else will just crucify you. And you've got all the common sense bits about EVs, like let's make them small and light and usable around cities because they're short range. And then you've got what makes commercial sense for the current companies. And this is where mobility solutions can really change that paradigm, because today, if I want to go and get an Uber, I have to pay for the Uber, but I've already got a car at home on my drive. So the marginal cost to me of getting an Uber is real money I have to pay for. Whereas when you take somebody who doesn't have access to a vehicle, it's just direct cost. You know, if I spend money on an Uber, I create some value, whether it's entertainment or the ability to get to work and ability to make money. There's a direct relationship there. Whereas for me, I've already got this sunk cost. I've paid the insurance, I've paid the tax, I've paid the purchase price. So those models and being able to optimize the vehicles for those models is so much easier once you're in a mobility situation. I think somebody mentioned autonomy, I remember it was in an earlier presentation. Autonomy is this thing that's coming. That's going to completely change the industry, because the people who make the most money in autonomy are people who clean cars. Because when you get in an autonomous car, the most important thing is that there isn't vomit between the seats. That's the customer service. And so actually looking at, you know, when you're a company running autonomous cars, what you care about is how efficient that vehicle is. You don't care about really what it looks like. It's got to look neat and well designed and stuff, and your customer experience is completely different from what we associate with products today and the car industry. So I think all the trends kind of align, and EV is just another shove over the line in terms of changing the way we do business and not doing what Henry Ford did in 19 whenever it was, actually doing something that makes sense for people and the stuff they need to move.
Yeah. Thanks.
Can I provide a counter
opinion?
So battery swapping is a really interesting conundrum. My view for a long time was very much small scale. Battery swap works. If it's a motorbike, I'm friends with the guys who run Ampersand in Rwanda, which is a moto taxi, and they do swappable batteries. Makes a lot of sense at the 48 volt kind of end of the scale. But traditionally in Europe at least, 400 volts is what you need to move something along. And swapping 400 volts is not viable. It weighs 200 kilos. It's got high voltage connection, low voltage connection, and fluid connections. That's a lot of work. But when you start thinking about emerging markets and the costs of, for example, swapping out 10, 20 kilo units out of a battery that are connected together to get 400, well, that's not actually a big barrier. Certainly for us in Rwanda, the labour cost of that would be pretty small. I'm sure in India it would be a similar kind of equation. So very much, I think there's a lot of room for innovation in that space. Is how do you make that swapping system work? How do you balance the power across the batteries? But I think it could be for particularly delivery vehicles, relatively shorter range vehicles that want to do 2 swaps a day. And it also potentially could work really well with solar, because you can have a set of batteries parked underneath the solar panels charging. Whereas if you have to do all your charging at night, you're looking at quite high power requirements, even though you've got, say, 10 hours overnight. On the product differentiation, I guess I'd look forwards 20 years to autonomy, in which an autonomous car, if it goes fast, it will make you feel sick. If it goes round a corner quickly, it will make you feel sick. A lot of the things that today brands are saying are what drives their sale price, Porsche being a classic example, Jaguar, or lots of others, those attributes are irrelevant when you're in autonomy. And it was really interesting, the guy talking earlier about modern luxury and Norton motorcycles. It's like luxury, and I asked the question, is traditionally about conspicuous consumption, but that's not at all compatible with an environmentally friendly world. And
Can I just come back on you? That's hanging a lot on an autonomous future.
It is. And autonomy is.
And I think, to say to the car buyer of today that in 10 years, forget the pleasure of driving, forget the fact that you can just jump out of your house and open your car and drive off wherever you want. You're going to have to wait 20 minutes for a car to turn up. If, like me, I live in the middle of nowhere in Cambridgeshire, it's going to be an hour and a half. I think the accessibility of transportation is always going to be a big problem for autonomy moving forwards. I don't think we're going to get to a 100% autonomous future. I think in city centres, ride-hailing, your example of Uber is really good. If you can eliminate the driver, you're driving down costs. But there are some challenges with that.
Oh yeah,
some significant challenges with that.
I think also our definition of luxury has to change, and that's what, like, so the guy was talking earlier about how what's the guys who own all the luxury brands? LMVH. They've announced that they're going to go to 100% manufactured diet. Yeah, that's the one. 100% manufactured diamonds in like the next 10 years, and there you're swapping out something that's genuinely rare and actually comes out of a lot of low-income places, so it's not necessarily brilliant, but they're changing the definition of luxury. They're going, this is a manufactured product, but it's still going to be luxurious, and I think vehicles are going to have to change in terms of what we could perceive as a luxurious product. You know, doing 1,000 miles an hour is just bad for the environment. You can still be luxurious without going 1,000 miles an hour, because none of us do it anyway.
Yeah. Question? Got a question there.
While we're waiting, I think your point about the technology we have today, as we saw from the innovations I talked about, the important innovations are often not the kind of exciting ones. Things like solid state will rise up at different points, but in getting people to travel less, or the innovation of having smaller vehicles, so you put half the size battery in, well, suddenly we've doubled the capacity available for building electric vehicles. Now, how do you get people into smaller vehicles? Well, that's an innovation of marketing and stuff like that. It's not an innovation of technology. You can build smaller batteries, right?
We grow smaller people.
Given where the world is currently at, I believe growing smaller people is a technology available to us. It just doesn't involve McDonald's.
Hi, my name is Emerson Pain. I'm from Angola, and my question goes directly to Simon Davies. I have a bit of a notion of the size of the country where I live, and I know that Ox is doing very well in Rwanda, which is a 26,000 kilometers square nation. It's the size of the smallest province that I have in my country. So do you really think that electrical batteries will be the solution for mobility in Africa, in particular in Africa, where urban cities, well-populated, are almost 400 to 500 kilometers away from each other?
It's a big challenge. Obviously, the further apart you put people, the more energy it takes to move between them. I guess the question is, what's the alternative? Because there's hydrogen, but all of the projected demand of clean hydrogen is less than the hydrogen we currently use for industrial purposes. So anything we do to make hydrogen-based vehicles is just increasing CO2 output, because there is no way there's going to be any green hydrogen for that. In fact, we need to lower industrial consumption for hydrogen, not find new uses for it. And I think maybe it comes down to things like battery swapping. Like, how do we, if we've got to move goods long distances, we need to find ways of moving the energy. And so, quite a lot of sunshine in Angola. Swapping batteries with solar power directly, put the energy straight into a battery, then the next motorist comes along and switches it up, is probably where I would go with a solution for countries of a larger size. But it's an interesting question. We talk about a more local life. Like, I live 15, 20 miles away from here. I came on the train today. It's that means very different things in different parts of the world. It's easy to say a local life when you live in London, because literally everything is local. When you live in Cambridgeshire, North Wales or Angola, it's a very different scenario. So we have to figure out how that works. I think there's one thing we can probably all agree on, that the solution that we currently have is wrong. And I think there's a lot of stuff done where people take Western technology and decide to dump it in other countries because that's what we want. We actually need solutions that work for the environments that we're in. And actually, my view is it is much easier to deliver mobility as a service in Africa than it is in the UK. I talked about it before, I've already got a car. If you haven't got a car, mobility service is a win-win-win-win-win. If you have got a car, it's a problem. And I think electricity supply is really interesting. Lots of households in Africa don't have power. Why is that? It's principally because when you plug a household in, you don't generate any value. You might put a light on, which means a kid can study. The payback on children going to school is about 5 to 10 years. Very slow economic payback. So in 10 years' time, you can afford to pay the electricity bills. The good thing about mobility is it pays back instantly. So if you compare the scenario today, if I run a diesel truck in Rwanda, I am using fuel that's been imported. I'm not sure Rwanda subsidised, but many, many countries subsidise the fuel. So the government it's big national flow of payments. It's a big exchequer cost because you're subsidising the fuel. If I switch to an electric vehicle, I'm using a locally generated fuel, which is a tax revenue instead of a exchequer cost, and there's no exports. So there's a lot of, and it generates cash. Like when you move something, it gets more valuable. If I have a diamond and it's sat on my desk at home, you will not pay for it. You'll only pay for it the moment I physically give it to you. And the biggest weakness we see in Rwanda, where we're based, is people don't do things because if they do it, they just can't move the stuff. What's the point in spending all day labouring in the fields to grow stuff if every other day the truck breaks down and my stuff rots on the way to market? So electric transport is a highly productive use and therefore really pulls energy. We don't see ourselves as having a problem with energy supply because all the energy companies will come to us because we're their best customer, and we can turn energy they generate one day in sunshine into cash the next day.
So this morning there was a lot of talk about EVs not being as clean as they're made out to be. In terms of the carbon generation and carbons in batteries, etc. What are your views on that in terms of how that's going to pan out? Because, it also said that by 2030 we'd probably be at 39 million vehicles. Today we're at a vehicle population of 73 million with 6.6 million EVs, going to 39 million by 2030. And yet, I don't think we'll be able to solve this problem by then in terms of generating clean energy. And what are anyone's views on that?
Well, I think
the problem isn't the EV bits. The problem is the rest of the car, and that's where a lot of the solution has to come in. Exactly what Isobel said about the rest of the vehicle. Like when you have a scenario where one person requires a 2.5 ton vehicle to move that one person, it makes no sense. If the CEO of Brompton, the bicycle maker, was here, he would be effing and blinding and pointing out that his 10-kilo bicycle carries his 90-kilo frame around. That's a ratio of 9 to 1. Why is it that he needs a 2.5 ton SUV to carry him and his dog, which is a completely opposite ratio?
That's also the battery.
But it's not really the battery. There's a lot of stuff in an electric car. A Mercedes EQ, how much of that is essential? Very, very little of it. And we've got to change the way, if we really want to avoid emissions, we have to change the way we think about luxury. We have to change the way we think about products to sustainability. And if you throw, some people we're starting to see it. Brands are starting to see sustainability. The guy earlier was talking about trainers. It's a fairly easy product to identify. I want a carbon negative trainer, and you can do that. If you took that at the car industry, just leaving the fuel you put in your car aside, there is so much opportunity to do stuff about making cars more environmentally friendly, and you can make it EV as well. We shouldn't see it as a magic sticking plaster that's going to solve the
only thing